Like, people are not afraid of entrepreneurship here. They're not afraid to start businesses or be in business for themselves, and that's not the case everywhere else. We have that naturally in the DNA of the Utah population. So let's spark it and make it even bigger. We want everyone to win.
So welcome. This has been one in the works for the longest time. I think it was over a year ago. Reached out and you were so gracious as always and said, "Hey, I don't do these, but I will do it for you." And then we couldn't put it together. Jeff lives in Southern California, but so excited. I know your story. I've known you for a long time, but I'm excited to go deeper into the story. So anyway, thanks for coming out and spending some time with us.
I'm very happy to do it.
Hey, so I'm going to jump to the end. When I was at Vivint, we had you come out and speak to our group, and you said something to me that I'll bet you I've repeated 50 times when I'm teaching young people. And I want you to delve into this, and it'll kind of take us back to the beginning. But you gave this story where you said, when you're young, you really care what your mom and dad think. And then as a teenager, it switches and you really care what your peers think. But then there's this point where you transition to a young professional, and it's not your peers and it's not your parents, but if you can have some external mentor, some person that believes in you more than you believe in yourself, that's a blessing. It will change your life. And you talked about how you had that experience. Maybe let's start there, because I think that was so profound to me, because that was my life experience too.
Yeah, I was really fortunate. My first job, I was still in college. It was a part-time job. And I worked as a salesperson at the Covey Leadership Center. This is before Covey had merged into the Franklin Covey company, the Day Planner company. Stephen Covey, of course, had written this iconic book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I had read that book, and I was so attracted to the content. When I found out it was located down the street from BYU, I'm like, I have to work at this place. And I had to interview 3 times. They said no the first time, second time no, and I would get feedback. And I realized I wasn't a very good interviewer. I didn't really know how to conduct myself in an interview. There was no ChatGPT to guide me. And luckily, eventually, they hired me. And they started me at this entry-level sales job. And it was like a boiler room for self-help stuff, really. We were selling training for this content to companies. And the book had a business reply card in it. We called it a BRC. So if you read this book and you liked the content, you would mail this self-addressed card in, and it would say, look, I'm working HR at Disney, or whatever it would be. And those lead cards would come to me. And I would call them and say, hey, let me tell you a little bit more about Stephen Covey and our organization, how we work with companies. And I would try and sell them on seminars inside the company. And it was a little boiler room-esque. And eventually, maybe a year into it, my boss called me in, and he'd really taken me under his wing. And for whatever reason, he saw something in me and believed in me, and it gave me a confidence, and I didn't want to let him down. And it's kind of a two-way street. It's not just them believing in you. It creates a confidence in yourself that you may not have had, a desire to not let them down. And so he said, we're going to start a new division in the company. We want to launch audiobooks. We've never done this before, but we think the content is so robust that we can put it on CDs and audiobooks. And you're one of the top 3 salespeople. So I wanted to offer it to you. He brought us all in. I wanted to offer it to you 3 first. Do you want to take a flyer and try and build this little business? So the 3 of us that had kind of learned to sell Stephen Covey content over the telephone, we started selling audiobooks. But this time, instead of selling to companies, we were calling Barnes & Noble. Back then, there was a mall retailer called Walden Books, and Ingram, the big book distributor, and trying to get them to buy our self-published audiobooks. I put Stephen Covey in a sound booth for 13 hours, talking about the content, recording it. And I drove to visit my sister in Southern California. And on the way there, I had a yellow pad, like a legal pad. And I would put the cassettes in the car cassette player listen to them, make notes of the edits. We're cutting this, we're adding this. And I came up with a 60 or 90-minute tape. And then, of course, CDs came out about this time. So we put it on CD. And about a year later, it became the #1 best-selling audiobook in the world. From the three of us pounding the telephones to all these book distributors and book retailers and trying to sell this stuff. And that year, the company did 77 or 78 million in profit.
Whoa.
And about the whole company, and about 3 million of EBITDA.
So,
and my little division,
tons of top line.
My little division with 3 salespeople, we did 4 million with 3 million of EBITDA. So our entire contribution was like the entire EBITDA for the company that year. And so it was this really gratifying experience where I got real work experience. It was hard. Talking on the phone and selling something is a little bit like knocking doors. It's a cousin, maybe a little easier, but not much. You have to learn how to sell over the telephone. It's a lifelong skill that if you do it, it'll stay with you forever. And just having that guy, and then I got promoted again and was able to work up in the organization and all of that while I was still a student. And so that was really my first lucky break. Is I got an association with this wonderful content. I learned it backwards and forwards. I learned how to sell over the telephone, take a lot of rejection. And I was able to build, I would call it entrepreneurship, a little tiny business inside of a bigger business at a young age. And I think all of that gave me the confidence to then start my first business.
So there's so many places I want to go with this. The first one was, who was that leader? Was it your manager? Was it Covey? Like, who was combination of both?
Yeah, I would love to say it was Stephen Covey, but no, there were several. My first boss, he was a guy named Dave Fairbanks, and just an amazing believer in young talent. He really did that for everyone that reported to him. Then my next boss was a guy named Dave Williams, and he was the exact same way. He held us to a really high standard, but he really believed in us. And I had these deep connections with both of them. And to this day, I've stayed close with Dave. And so they both had a big impact on my life. I did, however, about 2 months ago, I'm on an airplane. And I'm flying home to Orange County. And as I'm approaching my seat, I look at the guy in the seat next to me. I'm like, that's Stephen Covey. It was Stephen M.R., who I hadn't talked to for probably 20 years.
From the dead.
And I'm like, Stephen? He's like, I could tell he couldn't even really place me.
Yeah.
Like, it's Jeff. And
it's
he's like,
you got skinny. Like, you used to be fat Jeff. Now
you're
like skinny Jeff.
Yes, it's true. And we talked the whole flight and reminisced about these days at Covey. And it was the most wonderful conversation. It's like, what are you doing now? I'm investing. How do I invest in the fund? We'll send you subscription docs. It's really easy. And so I had this great rekindling with him, and we were able to spend an hour and a half on the flight talking about all these old times, building these businesses, and what it was like to work at the Covey Leadership Center in the early days. It was an incredible collection of talent in Utah County. It really was. All these great young people that went on, and if you've tracked their careers, they've all done amazing things.
What do you think it was? Because talk to me about the content and how that's influenced your career. Like having that as a framework or a paradigm or like a map of how you see the world.
Yeah, I mean, I've made my kids read the 7 Habits when they were like 7 years old. Like I didn't even wait till they were old enough to really take down a book. I'm like, you got to read this. Because that's how impactful that book has been on my life. And there's so many parts to even try and reconstitute it here. But I think of all of the parts of content that resonated with me most deeply, it's really just the whole concept of an abundance mentality and really trying to approach things with a way of optimism and helping other people, not needing to get paid right now. Just do it for the right reason, right motive, that. Yes. And it's a profound principle.
So I had a similar life experience, went on a mission, and my mission president let us read whatever we wanted. And I got in this Covey bender, and every one of your audiobooks, like every one of them, I was just devouring it. It was exactly what I needed at that point in life. And it impacted me so much. I went and worked at Franklin Covey for 3 or 4 months just because I was like, this has really impacted me. And my daughter, where's my daughter at? So this is Covey right there. So we actually named one of our kids.
Amazing.
Yeah, on that same note, because it when I think about my life looking back, so much of how the interpersonal and how I think about people and how I think about expanding the pie and, personal habits and planning, it's all off that template, and it's created tremendous value in my life.
Yeah, I've had the exact same experience.
So so maybe let's go back earlier. Where was home growing up?
Yeah, I grew up in a little city called Pleasanton, which is in the East Bay area, so close to Oakland and San Jose, a suburb of Silicon Valley. And my dad was a dentist and from a family of 5, and it was about as perfect an upbringing as you could hope to have. A lot of love in the home and good teachers and good friends, and it's just a great place to grow up. And I for sure thought when I left to come to college, like I was going to go back
That
there.
was home.
Yeah, it was so good. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'll for sure live here when I grow up.
And so what took you to BYU?
Really, my mom. I was interested in some of the California schools, but I had a girl that I liked, and she was going to BYU. And I think my mom knew I have this belief that some people get energy by breaking rules. Some people get energy by keeping them. And when those two are together, it doesn't work very well. I think my mom knew I got a lot of satisfaction by breaking rules and getting away with it. And so she thought the structure of BYU would be very good for me. And it probably was.
Yeah, I mean, you take even just that Covey thing and that's the framework. So you go have this experience, the entrepreneurship, where you're not taking the personal risk. You're not signing on the leases, but you're getting a lot of autonomy and decision making and hiring and how to structure and leadership. What was, when did you know this has ran its course? I've got everything that I'm going to get out of this.
Yeah. So about a year after we had been acquired by Franklin Covey, the culture started changing. The feeling you had when you worked there was different. There were 2 businesses that weren't very compatible. They were just very different. And it didn't merge very well.
It was a hard merger.
Yeah. And a few years later, right, people were shifting away from day planners to Outlook and computers. And so I think part of that business was challenged as well. And when a business gets hard, it exposes the flaws. And so I think all those things were going on. And there was just a moment where I think I felt like I had everything I needed, probably to a fault. So I started coming up with ideas for businesses. I knew I wanted to start a business. And I think I would have characterized myself back then as too much ego, hubris, thought I knew a lot about business, but probably really didn't. And, so I had all the confidence to go start a business, but not much know-how. And long story short, I ended up doing my first company, and it was a great teacher of many lessons.
So what was the business and what did you learn?
Yeah, so this is about 1997, 1998, and people are beginning to grok that the internet is going to be a game-changing, not just like a wave, it is going to fundamentally change everything about technology and how we interact with it. And I'd read this book by an author named Seth Godin. It was his first book ever. It was called Permission Marketing. And it was just the idea that digital communications can be so much more frictionless than all of the old forms like direct mail and catalogs and things that we were used to doing for marketing back then. So I had this idea, well, there's all these small businesses and they don't know who their customers are. They don't have an ability to market from them. I'm going to build a little piece of technology so they can capture their customer data, whether it's a restaurant or a retailer.
Which was way ahead of its time.
1997.
Yeah.
I didn't know anyone. I knew one guy. I don't even remember how I met him. I saw him here tonight. Mr. Mattingly, Ty. He's working in the chairman's office at Novell. And all I know is Novell's a big company. They got a really great cafeteria. And so I hit up Ty Mattingly. I can't remember how we got introduced, Ty. Maybe you remember. And Ty's a real technologist. He's working at the big tech company, and he's like, I know some people that could help you. And he introduces me to some people. And I think you eventually joined the board, right? Something like that, or at the very least was very helpful because we didn't know what we were doing. But we started a business.
Because Novell at that point was it.
Like Novell was like a multi-billion-dollar company in the 90s here in Utah County, and Eric Schmidt became the CEO.
Which is insane.
It was an incredible Utah success story in every way. This is the biggest thing going in the 90s for sure. WordPerfect as well. They were both incredible businesses. Eventually they came together. So Ty introduced me to a bunch of people, engineers from Novell, other business people, and we put together a team and an angel round. We started this business. It was called Freeport. We scaled up to about 120 people. We're starting to get revenue, and we're basically just built a marketing platform to allow retailers to collect their customer information and remarket to them. The same thing that Radio Shack had been doing as a cataloger, like in my youth. Whenever you went to Radio Shack and you bought something, they'd be like, what's your name and address? And then the catalog would show up at your house. We just digitized all that. And then the year 2000 came and the dot-com crash happened. And we had just raised our first round of capital. We were off to the races. We're hiring people. I think we raised about $5 million. And then the markets froze. And all the big tech companies back then, Intel, Apple, Cisco, Oracle, they lost 90% of their value. 90%. Like we see the stock market lose 10 or 20%. People are freaking out. Yeah. This was 90%. Amazon, $4 a share. Every one of these companies went to the floor. You could buy any tech company for pennies. It was incredible. And so many businesses went out of business. So about this time, we start to go out later in the year 2000 when the market had fully corrected, and it didn't just come back. It dropped initially in April or May of that year and then took a second drop in October and would not recover. And it was the first true nuclear winter of venture capital. So we went, pounded the pavement. We pitched all the Silicon Valley firms. No one was writing any checks. It was probably just effort not even worth spending.
The faucet completely turned off.
It was just a nuclear winter for technology. Everyone was underwater. No one was investing. And we had to lay off 100 people. I had to lay off 100 people that I had recruited from great jobs to come work there and be a part of it. And it was the most painful thing I've ever gone through in business. The hardest teacher of lessons. So from then on, of course, there's a learning and everything. I'm like, I am never going to be dependent on someone else's capital. I'm never going to spend so much that if I don't raise another round, I'm out of business. I just won't do that again. So we didn't do that at any of the other businesses I was involved with after that, because I didn't want to take that risk again.
But it was kind of the opposite of what was being told to you, right? It was like,
of course,
go. There's like unlimited money, like move.
The closest thing to 2021 COVID free money era was 1998-99, the first internet era. Interest rates were cheap. Money was flowing. Money was everywhere. It was easy to raise money. I was a first-time tech entrepreneur. I'm like, wow, this is really easy. Like, it felt easy. You go talk to investors and they want to write you checks and get involved, and you go recruit an employee and they wanted to join. There was no friction. So you thought you were good. But it turns out it's not until the water goes out that it exposes the real entrepreneurs from the fake ones. And I was still a fake one. I didn't have any experience yet or any business doing that. I had some skills, but I was faking a lot of it. And it was really big letdown.
But do you think that was a you or that was a market thing? Because
both. I didn't understand.
Everybody died. Like there wasn't.
I didn't. You can blame it on that, but there's a long list of things I would do differently to operate that business today than I did then because I didn't know better.
So give me like 2 or 3 things. Like what are those? These are the principles that my next company, this, and this because of company 1.
Yeah. I mean, I think I learned first and foremost that culture is the most important thing. It's the only differentiator in most companies. If you're really lucky and you're Google and you have a deep technology moat or some kind of natural monopoly, okay, fine. But I think most companies are really made by the quality of people and what it feels like to work there and what the behaviors are that are accepted and not acceptable inside the company. And when you get everyone on the same page, rowing together on a common vision, it's really, really powerful. So some lessons. completely changed how I hired people. So you generally hire people for skills. You look at a resume and you say, look, I'm hiring someone in accounting. Do they know how to put things in the right bucket in the ledger? Do they have an accounting background? And there are certain jobs where you need a specific skill. But most of the work in the company, any creative good person can do. So I would let the hiring manager screen initially, and they might interview a bunch of people and say, this is the person I want to hire. But then we added a second interview, which is a committee of 5. We called it our culture committee. These are people that really deeply understand, likely the early employees that created the DNA to begin with of the company. And they really understand the behaviors of the company, the values of the company. And the second interview, you're not allowed to look at a resume and you don't talk about skills.
Wow.
Right? Now we're just filtering it. The hiring manager already said you're qualified and they want to hire you. Now the second gate is, will you fit our culture? And we developed a set of questions that we would ask to expose people's values. My favorite one would be, tell me your life story starting with kindergarten. And in a job interview, people they don't know where to start. It takes them off guard. But they start telling their life story. And the life story is what reveals their values, right? And you want to hear that. You want to hear them tell the story of their life. That is how you get to know a person. And the second question I would ask is, when you get to the prime age in your career and you've reached the top, the pinnacle of your career, what does that look like? Are you an individual contributor? Are you like the world's greatest graphic designer or engineer? Are you a CEO? Like, what is your job? What do you do? How do you spend your time? How much money do you make? Because I think it's really arrogant to judge someone's potential. I'm sure there are people that I wouldn't think would amount to much that amount to incredible human beings if you tried to judge it. But you can't judge their ambition. And in a startup, I've always thought the attribute that matters the most is intensity. There has to be a level of intensity in the business. And so while you can't judge, I think it's unfair to judge their potential. I would say, describe this dream job. And that's when their ambition comes out. This is how I see myself in the future. And there's no right answer to the question, but you really get a sense, is this someone who's set a goal and is driving towards this thing that they want to become in the future? And when you hear someone articulate that, it's really attractive. When someone has a crisp, cogent thought, in fact, as another tangent to this, a few years later, I thought, I'm going to interview every single person in the company. I want a 30-hour-minute interview with more than 100 employees at Stance. And I pulled each one into the office, and that was one of the questions I asked. And what I was startled to find out is about a third to a half of the people didn't even have an answer for that. Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Give me the dream in detail. I want to see the full, vivid, color dream of your life, your work life when it's peaking. And I was shocked that so many people couldn't articulate what that was or a path to it in the middle of their careers, right? And so that really led me to double down on that idea. I really wanted to understand how someone wanted to evolve. And then I can judge, hey, do we have a spot like that in our company for a person like this? You know, and if they want to be the CEO, maybe like, I got to quit and you got to take my job. But I did have a guy, and he was a very junior person in finance, and he said, I want to be a CFO. So as we got bigger, the company got to 100 million in sales, and we thought, we should probably have a CFO now. We have currency exchange. We had some complicated stuff. I had been kind of the CFO with a rent-a-fo helping me up until that point. And I purposely didn't hire anyone because I knew he wanted it. I connected him with another CFO friend of mine who I knew would be a great mentor for him. They would go surfing every month. They became friends. Eventually, he became the VP of finance and still never hired a CFO. And because we had this interview and he had told me my dream is to be the CFO, after years and years of work on his side to become that, we made him our CFO.
Dude, that's like the raddest thing I've ever heard. Like that fires me up like nothing else. So like you literally, like as a junior guy.
We held the job for him. His name is Brian Shea.
That's amazing.
he is an amazing human being and was a fantastic CFO. He actually told me last week he's leaving after something like 13 or 15 years. He's going to go CFO somewhere else, and he'll be really well qualified and do a great job. But we held the job for him because we knew what he was the track he
had to have been a star. He had to have been like crushing it every step of the way.
Of course.
You're not holding it for...
Nope. But I saw the effort.
Yeah.
I saw he was trying. And by the way, my friend that I'd connected him with, who was a CFO at a public company, would call me and say, he's great.
Yeah.
He asks good questions. We have great conversations. He's great. And so it was a really great experience. But that's a long-winded answer to, look, culture's the most important.
Culture's number one.
One way to screen for that is hiring and firing. I don't fire people for poor performance. I would fire people because their behaviors were incompatible with our values. We would publish really clear values. Like, as an example, we would say we really care about teamwork. That's a generic term. Everyone knows what teamwork is. But then we'd define it and we'd say, what does this really mean? Okay, this means you're low fingerprint, high impact. We're not a culture where we take credit for stuff. We're a culture where we contribute and give the credit to other people. So then if someone walks in and they take all the credit for every little thing they do, it's not about their performance. It's just about they have a behavior that's incompatible with how we act. So we fire them for that. And we tell everyone in the company, we fired him because of that. That's why we fired him, not their performance. We fired him because he's a credit taker, and we're not credit takers in this business. What does that signal to everyone who stays? Okay, if I want to work here, I can't be a credit taker because that's incompatible with that, right? You only got to fire one person for that, and that value is now bedrock. It's not going anywhere. So the reason why you fire people is to double down on the values. So you hire for the values and you fire for the values. That's how you defend the culture.
Wow.
Highly deliberate. Like, building a great culture is a very intentional thing that you got to start with at the beginning. It develops on its own, whether or not you pay attention to it.
When it's like a plant, like you got to like nourish that sucker.
That's right. You can't even take your eye off the ball for a second. We would have an employee each month present on one of the values and what it meant to them and go deep on it, right? Take one of these principles. Like, we would say, look, we hunt as a pack. We're not lone wolves. This is a team business here. We want to work and win together and lose together. And so, like, if you're not really into that, we're not a place for you. It's not that you're flawed. It's just you're not a fit here. And each time you double down on one of those values, the concrete of the culture dries a little bit.
Because going through the companies that you've been a part of, I think the defining characteristic has got to be culture. Like, Skullcandy had a vibrant culture.
Although a lot of the Skullcandy culture, some parts of it, we weren't intentional about. They just became a thing. And that was okay.
So like we took our team to Stance, and this is when Stance, the meteoric rise of Stance, and it was just on fire. And we took our team to Stance, and I walked away liking it more than I liked it when I went, and I already liked it a lot. And it had to do with the aesthetic. It had to do with the gym. We're there in Hardin's playing basketball in the gym, and you take our entire team through the Stance store, and they're filling up, buying everything that they can buy super cheap. And you talk to them, and Clark talked to them, and there was, and I'm like, this is crazy. We're not, this isn't Jeff's company, but Jeff took a day with us, and like it influenced our culture like that. We took those principles and applied them, and it made us better. But what we got from that was like, hey, these guys take this really serious.
Yeah, I've always thought that, I think I learned this at Skullcandy, or observed it, or had the thought that company culture is really the leading indicator of brand strength. So if you want to play that forward as a venture capitalist now.
Say that one more time.
I think company culture is the leading indicator of brand strength. Because what's happening on the inside eventually gets manifested on the outside to your customers.
That's so profound.
If it's toxic, or maybe it's not toxic, but it's just not a well-developed or thoughtful culture, that'll reflect in the marketplace as well. Whatever you build internally reflects externally. And so I've thought that for a long time. And so I think when you're building a brand specifically, I mean, if you're selling a headphone or a sock, yes, there are product differentiations, but it's largely a commodity. It's not a hard product to manufacture. Shoot, you can manufacture a car now. It's not that hard to go contract manufacture anything. And so the brand really is the thing that differentiates. Like, you don't think of Nike as a shoe company. You think of them as a brand about championships and competing and athletes and the thrill of victory. And there's so much more wrapped up in that than just it's a shoe company that they built over many years, probably very intentionally, if not initially, eventually. So this culture and brand idea, they're tightly related. And one of the reasons I think for our success in the marketplace was because of our success internally.
So it was buzzing before it was buzzing. Like you knew that you had something special before the world knew that you had something special.
Well, you bring like 10 or 20 people together when the company's really young and the culture just develops, right? Stephen Covey would call these the cultural mores, or just the normal way of acting and behaving in the company, right? And that just is happening. But in the example I gave earlier of, say, credit taking, that's a subtlety. If that initial team is a bunch of abundant, humble, confident people, you won't have credit takers, right? It won't even be a thing. So, but as the company grows, new people come into it. And all of a sudden, you get a couple of people that operate a little differently than that initial DNA strand that you set. And that's when you got to like prune it, fix it, communicate it, over communicate it. The amount of times we talked about the values with very specific detail, like, you just can't address it enough.
And that was the difference.
Yeah, it's your only differentiating factor.
So Tom Peters is like one of my favorite business thought leaders. And he's got a quote that says, "Culture and culture maintenance are CEO job number one." And I think about that when you're describing both the companies you operated personally and then also like from an investment lens where you choose to allocate capital. I want to go kind of briefly through the timeline, and then I want to go into investing, because I think this is a really interesting idea that I want to dive into. So you founded you did the company, had to shut it down.
Actually, we sold it for a few $100,000, I think.
So this is a sale.
Effectively. Yeah. It was painful, really painful.
When
failing that early, that big, it was a real blow. And I think it was compounded by the fact that I had too much hubris and ego at that age, whatever, early 20s. And I had this great successful journey at the Covey Leadership Center that my confidence was really high, but not for a good reason, not for a substantial reason. It was more theoretical. I hadn't taken the lessons, the hard knocks yet.
But how do you, I want to keep going, but I want to touch on this. Like, since I've known you, I didn't know the hubris Jeff. I didn't know the young Jeff. I've known the Jeff that's like pretty comfortable in your own shoes, have had a level of success that I've never felt like you had anything ever to prove to me ever. Like, what is that transition like? Like, when was the time where you owned it enough that you didn't need to show people? Like,
I don't know. It was probably a combination of maturity, a combination of experience, a combination of exposure to other good mentors. I eventually began to perceive that the best leaders had sort of a quiet confidence and humility. They were deeply capable, but they didn't have to show it or show it off or be worried about what other people thought about them. And I think it took me a fair number of years to mature before I was able to drop that.
Do you think you have to own something before you give it away? Like, do you think like
Maybe
you kind of have to? Yeah.
I think when I was younger, for some reason, I'm not sure because I'm not a therapist and I can't psychoanalyze myself and I've never tried to, but I think for some reason I did value the opinions of other people, either business people or just people in the community. And I cared what they thought about me on some level until I didn't.
Yeah.
And I think it was a gradual shifting. Eventually you become your authentic self or a more authentic version of yourself. I think it's a lifelong process. I heard this quote that you never really become your true self till your parents pass away, right? Because you don't feel the pressure to live up to their values. You can choose your own values. Not that they may overlap or be different. I don't know. But so I think it is a long process.
Morbid. So when did you decide I'm going to get back on the bowl? Like,
okay, so I'm really lucky, to be honest with you. I have a lunch with this angel investor guy that I've met. My company's just shut down. His name was Greg Warnock. And we go to lunch. We'd met at a couple of business conferences. He's like, I want to go to lunch with you. So we go get sushi at Fort Union. And during the course of the conversation, he's like, I didn't really love your business, but I really liked you. And he was like, would you want to work in venture capital? And I was like, well, seeing that I'm currently unemployed, any job is better than no job. I don't know what I'm going to do next. And he's like, oh, we got an office for you right now. Can you start this afternoon? And I was like, okay. Seemed like a good opportunity. Go learn from a good investor. And so they had just started raising their first fund. It was called V-Spring Capital. And the idea was, hey, Utah's this great market and there's not enough funds here. Let's do another one. They got 5 diverse but good entrepreneurs to come together and fundraise. And hired a couple of associates, and I was one of them. And we went out and we raised a $125 million fund.
What? That's like crazy.
In the year 2000.
That's insane.
The weird part about it was right in the middle of a nuclear winter. Like, no one was doing anything tech. No one was doing venture capital. But there was enough people in Utah, the Ashtons from WordPerfect, and obviously all the early Novell executives, the Ron Hines of the world. There was a lot of people like that. But back then there was Megahertz, and Ty, you could probably help me with all these old tech companies. There was a lot of iOmega. No one's even heard of that. This was this really cool disk drive, and it went huge. It was up in Ogden, like hundreds of millions or more in sales. And so there was all these tech companies, and all those founders came together and put money in the fund. They wanted to build the ecosystem. They saw something in Utah really early. It was still nascent, right? I mean, this is so early. Josh had just started working on Omniture. It was called mycomputer.com. Actually, it was called Superstats. It hadn't even been renamed a second time. I mean, this was really early entrepreneurship in Utah.
So Greg comes to you and says,
do you want a job at a venture fund? I'll pay you money and you can help me work on investments. Yes, I will do that.
Kind of like the only venture fund or one of a few that was doing
Pelion existed. It was called Utah Ventures back then, and it was the other one. And then unfortunately there was a third fund. Back then it was called Wasatch Venture Fund. They later rebranded to Epic. And I had lost their money in my first business, Freeport. So that wasn't really an option to go work there. I don't think they were particularly happy with the return on capital. So the fact that anyone was willing to give me a job, that was kind of miraculous.
So you just went out and started getting reps.
Yeah, like literally he's like, write an investment memo, make some reference calls on these entrepreneurs, look at these financial statements, tell me the anomalies. Half of this stuff I didn't even know how to do, but it was gregarious enough that I could figure it out.
You're how old?
I was like 27.
So you're a young guy. And so you go out and you do that. How did that transition to your next company?
So it was great. I learned a lot. I think having a perch at a venture fund is a really good place early in your career because you get the reps of all the pitches. It's kind of cheating because these entrepreneurs come in. I think it's the best job in the world because I think about how lucky am I? These entrepreneurs come in and they pitch probably the best idea of their life. And I just get to sit there and curiously absorb it and listen to all their insights and observations. and how they're solving these problems, it is a really cool spot to be. And over time, you do it so much, especially as an associate, you're taking like 4 or 5 pitches a day because you're taking all the frontline pitches, that there's a lot of reps in that. And you begin to pattern recognize everything in those businesses and in those people.
Did you ever feel like, I'm just not qualified for this?
Oh, all the time. You have an imposter syndrome, but you just do your best. Like I was a relatively weak, I took one managerial accounting class and I didn't pay much attention. So like really dissecting trended data and financial statements was not something I had a lot of experience with. But I met this guy named Kent Thomas. He was the original rent-a-fo in all of Utah. So if you had a startup and you needed a CFO, you could rent Kent. He'd come in part-time. So I just called Kent. I'm like, yo, Kent, can you teach me how to do financial due diligence on a couple of companies? And he was such a gracious guy. He'd come down to the office, teach me everything about startups, everything they try and hide, why they try and use run rate, how to think about unit economics.
And this is all just new language to you.
I'm learning this all. I didn't even know what comes first, the balance sheet or the statement of cash flows. I didn't even know the order. It's like I had to learn all of that.
And Greg's just like, yeah, you'll do.
Greg's just like, go do it. Go do it. Write the memo, whatever.
So great.
And, we didn't have the University of YouTube, so we had to find experts and get education that way. That's how I learned it. And then, similar to like sales, you start making enough reference calls on entrepreneurs and you begin to learn how to talk to people over a telephone. What questions get a real response? What questions get a guarded response? How to peel the onion a little deeper.
Wow.
You do a couple thousand reference calls over a 4-year period of time, start to become pretty good at reference calling.
So you're just seeing pattern after pattern after pattern. And like, I've never actually thought about that. Somebody sitting down with the best idea they've ever had.
How lucky are you to get that?
Soul into you funding it. And you just get to like, listen.
Yes.
That's so cool.
It really is an amazing thing that happens.
And at a young age.
And you're getting an information advantage because now that I've seen pick the sector, 50 cybersecurity companies, a cyber entrepreneur comes in, I kind of know the language at this point. I might even have an information advantage to them because I've seen so many cyber businesses.
Which you have early in companies. You don't keep it long, right? Like the venture capital firm has that information advantage early and it disappears pretty quick. Like the institutional knowledge of actually building that company moves.
But this job was great because, I would stay up really late on a Sunday night writing these 20-page investment memos, analyzing the leadership team, analyzing the market opportunity, the competitors, the product, the IP, the financial statements, the unit economics, all the write-ups of all the reference calls I'd made, all the write-ups of all the research that I'm summarizing. I have to put that in a document for every deal I'm working on. You get a lot of reps at that. And those late nights, sometimes I would stay up till 3, 4, 5 in the morning writing those because I had to have them on the desks of every partner when they came in on Monday morning before partner meeting where we would discuss this stuff. So I'd have to have them ready. And those all-nighters, I probably learned more about business on those late night memo writing adventures than anything I have ever done in all of business. Like synthesizing all that information and putting in a report that other people could consume taught me a lot.
What a gift. Like when you I was teaching up at BYU today and it's entrepreneurial lecture series. So it's kind of you're just telling your story. And somehow the Steve Jobs commencement speech at Stanford comes up. And I think about that when I'm listening to your story about kind of connecting the dots, looking back, and you're like, that's 4 years of just venture boot camp. Reps.
I should have paid them. I should have paid them to have that opportunity. Another thing is they would drag me to board meetings as an observer. I actually eventually got my first board seat at this time. It's a company called MetaConnect, great entrepreneur Michael Colmere, but I'm getting dragged into all these board meetings with Greg and some of the other partners as well. And after the board meetings, we'd sit in his car. And as a mentor, he would say, "What did you think? Tell me all about your reaction to that board meeting. The things that were said." And on the fly, I'd have to critically think and analyze all the conversation of the board meeting And he'd sit there in the car with me for like 20 or 30 minutes before he'd turn it on, doing a postmortem on these board meetings. I'm like, in my 20s, I'd have no experience outside of my own board at the company that failed. So not much board experience. And I'm learning.
So you're just getting like this doctorate on governance.
Yes. And if you know Greg, his doctorate is in entrepreneurship. Like, he really did study that. So you can imagine like his level of rigor. He's quite a sophisticated investor. He's probably thought more about investing in private companies than very few other humans. Like, he's studied it at such a deep academic level. But yes, so at the time, those were very uncomfortable conversations because I would have to think on the fly and figure out what I thought, and I didn't always have the answers. But I look back at those reps now, and what he was really teaching me is how to process a board meeting. And where else do you get that training? Like, it was a really, really incredible place to start a career.
So you did that for 4 years.
Yep. Then the hubris comes back. Now I think I'm starting to like find my way. I'm getting kind of confident about things, and I'm starting to dream about another company. Actually, I'm dreaming of being a partner at the firm. So I call the partners into a meeting, all 5 of them. I'm like, guys, here's the thing. You've given me 0.75% carried interest in the fund, and I'm working crazy hours here. And look at all these great deals I sourced. Look at all this work I've done. I'm still at an age where I don't have the right perspective yet. The right perspective would have been, I should have paid them. This was one of the best training grounds to learn a business ever. They all were great mentors, these partners. Scott Petty, great mentor. Dinesh Patel, great mentor. These were real entrepreneurs and real business people that got in there and taught us all about the business of building startups and investing in startups. And we had you look at the team, it was me, Clark Miyasaki, JD Gardner, Jaron Paul, Gavin Christensen. That was our 5 associates.
Like the original gangsters right there. Like,
we were all super green, had no idea what we were doing and learning from each other. But it was like an amazing early dream team, right? And we loved working together. There was high mutual respect. It was a great place. And that leads me to, I put them in the conference room and I'm like, guys, I think I need to be a partner and I need 10% carried interest in the next fund. And instead of laughing me out the room, which is what they should have done, they should have just started mocking me relentlessly. They were like, okay, we'll talk about it. And then they came back and they're like, yeah, maybe we would consider some kind of principal role with like a 3% carried interest. And I just thought to myself, I can't work this hard and not own more of it. I've got to have ownership. I learned that at Covey. Covey sold for something like $180 million.
Big number.
And I noticed the difference. There weren't that many people that had equity, but I was paying attention. So I knew that the value was in equity. And so a dear friend of mine from college, his name's Morgan Lynch. He lives in Alpine. We were good friends in school. And he comes to me and he's like, I got this idea. And I want to create a marketplace. Like, instead of eBay for products, I want to create eBay for graphic designers. He was working at a software company, a big software company down in Provo. It was called InsureQuote. Mary Meeker had led a huge financing in it. This was a hot internet company. He was the head of marketing and he had to rebrand to this company. And he goes into Studio, which was an ad agency in the early 2000s here. Everyone used them in Orem, Provo. And had just a miserable experience getting a corporate identity done. And he's like, there's all these great designers in the cloud. Let's figure out a marketplace for them. So he started coming up to the office and we'd spend our evenings working on this business plan. And eventually we launched the business. And this weird product launched about this time called Google AdWords. We start buying keywords on Google and targeting graphic design. And the business just started to grow. And so I went to the partners and I'm like, I'm going to leave and go back to being an entrepreneur. And I think they were happy because they thought my expectation around equity was so crazy.
Probably a relief a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Morgan and I started working on this business, and it just was a great example of product market fit. We were able to deliver a great corporate identity to a company for about $500 using designers in the cloud.
Wow.
And we weren't just connecting a designer with a business. We were owning the customer relationship, but then we were using the cloud to get the work done. And it started to really scale. And so we thought we would go raise money. So Morgan and I, we went out to Silicon Valley, and we actually got these great introductions from Mike Leventhal and his wife, Kathy Schlein. Kathy's brother, Ted Schlein, was running Kleiner Perkins. She knew everyone in the Valley. She joined our board, and she walked us into every top firm.
She's like you guys or what?
Yeah, I think she loved design. She had worked at Apple with Steve Jobs, and she liked that we were kind of democratizing design for businesses. We were taking these designers that worked at these ultra high-end agencies and having them do work in our platform and delivering really high-quality work. And the first meeting was at Benchmark Capital, which was like the most storied firm we could possibly imagine. And we met with Bob Cagle. We met with Bob because Bob put $5 million into eBay to buy 20% of it. One of the few investors that got in eBay, was on the board of eBay. He'd recruited Meg Whitman, and eBay went to $100 billion. So that was a $20 billion return for Benchmark. We talk about 10x funds. Those early Benchmark funds had to be 100 or 200 or 300x funds. Like, they're so off the chart, the companies they had. And it wasn't just eBay. They had several others. And we start pitching Bob. We're on Sand Hill Road, and we get a few minutes into the presentation. I'm like 5 slides into a 20-slide deck. And he's like, boys, I'm in. You can just stop right here. I'm in. Let's cut a deal. And we look at each other like, wait, we got John Doerr for lunch. John Doerr is the investor who did Amazon and Google. I don't know, can we commit? And he's like, no, you can't leave till we have a deal. I want to do this deal. The last time I passed on one of you Stormin' Mormons was Josh James, and that was a mistake. I'm not making that mistake again. I know you Utah boys. That's what he said. He's like, I'm in for the Stormin' Mormons. So we cut a deal. And we then go pitch like 4 more funds. And of course, they liked it too. And now we're getting multiple term sheets, and it's getting awkward because we'd already kind of committed to Bob, but we're like, we got to stand by our word. So we come up with the idea. This was like novel technology back then. They're like, wait, we got like $9 million of demand, and we only wanted to sell $4 million worth of stock. We were doing about $3 million in sales. Like, what if we sold some stock? So we're like, hey guys, what about this idea of like, we only want to sell 20% of the company. You guys each want to own 20%. How about you buy 20% from us and 20% from the company? Like a secondary transaction. This didn't happen very often back then. It was actually frowned upon.
Of course.
It's like, if you're taking chips off the table, you must not be committed.
This early, yeah.
But no, we had a highly concentrated bet. But because the VCs were so greedy, they all wanted in. And they thought, oh, our chances are better if there's 2 versus 1. So we collapsed the term sheet. And we ended up doing a deal. We were the first or second deal out of Shasta's first fund with Todd Francis and Bob Cagle. And these were amazing board members. And I give you this long-winded story to segue into venture. I learned venture by observing Bob Cagle, who I think is the best I've ever seen. And when we get back to culture, Bob flies out, lands his Gulfstream at Provo Airport, probably next to Roney's. It's the only other one at this point in time. Comes to our little office. And like, do you want to see the dog and pony show? Get the conference room set up. We got slides, metrics. He's like, no. Not doing that. I want to spend the day with your people. Huh? Probably had 30, 40, 50 employees at this time. It's like, nah, I don't want to hear your stuff. I want to meet with your team. He just starts going cubicle by cubicle, and he'll sit down and be like, I'm Bob. Great to meet you. Where'd you come from? Do you like working here? Is your work interesting? Would you ever leave this place? And he goes and interviews every one of our employees like that. Because he properly understood that culture is the leading indicator of brand. And if you're a VC and you're thinking about investing in a company, well, you better get to know what it feels like to work there. What better way to do that than go spend an 8-hour day doing 50 interviews on site? He didn't want to spend his time in the conference room looking at our fancy slides. He wanted to meet with people. That was my first lesson in venture from Bob, of many, many, many lessons. But I always thought, man, if I ever get a chance to go back to venture, I want to emulate Bob Cagle. That guy knows how. Now he's a part owner of the Warriors. He's not really doing venture anymore. He's retired years ago. But I think one of the most talented venture capital investors that's ever played this game, and probably top 10 on the leaderboard, maybe top 3. I don't know. Like, not too many people that have returned more capital than him.
Wow. And that was successful outcome. Like you guys end up having kind
2 years later after we raised the money, man, we're just doing story time. I'm at this conference, the Montgomery Internet Summit in Santa Monica, California. I'm sitting in the lobby, and this tall 6'9" guy walks up, and he's like, "Hey, where's the registration desk?" And I'm like, "I go around the corner. It's over there." And he looks at my badge, and he's like, "Jeff, LogoWorks, I want to talk with you." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "My name's Chris. I run corporate development for HP." I'm like, "Oh, okay." Back then, HP was Fortune number 20. It was 120 billion top line, doing $1 billion of free cash flow a month.
crap.
It's like, I love what you're doing because what you do spills ink, and we're in the business of spilling ink. He had just bought Snapfish, which was the first internet photo sharing site, for $400 million. He sits down and he's like, "What's it going to take to get a deal done?" "I'll do a deal right here in the lobby." I'm like, "I don't know. I'd have to talk to our board. I have to talk to our partners. Like, I don't know." That starts a conversation. About 2 months later, we're selling the business to HP. We're making an announcement. We're now selling to HP. It's an all-cash deal. And it was an unbelievably quick and fantastic ride.
It's incredible.
I met a guy in a lobby who cut a check for $60 million 6 weeks later. Crazy. That's how it went down.
So you go have that experience, and then you kind of said, "I'm going to do venture on my own."
Well, first I have a pit stop because I got to work at HP. So I start working at HP, finally sit down, meet the CEO. For a $60 million deal, they could like do that off a department level P&L. Like, it was such a small deal for them. But I go in to meet the CEO, really interesting guy. He later gets fired for an inappropriate relationship with a consultant, becomes the president of Oracle. But I'm like, he's like, "How long do you want to stay here?" And I'm like, "As long as it's fun." And he's like, "Well, you give me a year." I'm like, "I'll give you 1 year." But they didn't have there was no earn out. There was no handcuff. It was just, "I'll give you my word. I'll stay for a year." He got fired about 360 days in, and I left 365 days later. But I had a great experience while I was at HP working at a big company and seeing how it worked, and just being a part of something big like that and seeing how it operated.
Kind of good as in like, this is a good experience, or like good as in, I never want to do that again?
Like, I wouldn't necessarily want to go work at a large business. It wasn't attractive in that way. It was big and complex. Maybe if you were the CEO, it would feel different. But I think being somewhere in the middle of a very large business probably doesn't feel very fun. I don't know how you would feel your impact. I think you wouldn't have much gratification from the work you did. It'd be hard to see the input and the output. But I learned a lot about how big businesses work and how big tech worked and how we looked at buying companies and how we looked at investing in companies. And, we turned down some really big acquisitions because they're just not going to move the EPS of a $120 billion company.
But they were awesome companies. Like, they would have been a great company. They're just, this machine was so big.
It was a big machine. So I did spend a year there and was very educational, and I'm glad I had that year. And then it's, well, what's next? So start making angel investments. And I think the first one I had made was Omniture with Josh. We were neighbors at BYU and been friends all these years. And then the second one, I have this snowboarder call me up and he's like, "Hey, I want to do headphones for snowboarders." And I say, "Okay, I bet this could be a $5 million business." We talk about it. And he starts asking me, "Hey, do you think you could help me raise some money? I need money. We don't have enough money." So I have him go present to the Utah Angels, probably Ty Mattingly and Ron Lindorf and Gary Williams, that old crew. That was the original like angel syndicate in Utah County. And I think a few of them invested actually in Skullcandy. But we go down. He calls me a few days before the Consumer Electronics Show in 2004. And he says, I need $30,000 for the trade show because I've already made the deposit, but I don't have the rest of the money. So he talks me out of my credit card over the telephone the evening before. And I'm like, it's got a $25,000 limit on, knock yourself out. Whatever you can charge on that. He's like, I'll pay you back in 4 months. Right. Goes to CES. Back then it was more of a selling, buying show. He sells $900,000 worth of headphones off his samples. Calls me at the end of the trade show. He's like, good news. I sold $900,000 worth of headphones. I'm like, I don't believe you. Send the POs. I want to read the POs. And he's like, bad news is I'm going to need $450,000 for the factories to make this stuff. And so I go to Greg Warnock, who'd hired me at V-Spring. I'm going to put $50,000 into this angel investment for Skullcandy. Do you want to come in alongside me? And he's like, yeah, I'd do $250. You do $250 in headphones for snowboarders? Seriously? He's like, no, that guy's kind of crazy. I like him. And it was right about this time. He's like, hey, I've been talking to this guy. You should know him. He went to BYU with you. I think he could know how to run this business, and he's willing to come full time, and we don't have to pay him anything. So he sets up this meeting, and I go up to Park City, and I meet Jeremy Andrus. And we talk, and it's clear like Jeremy's kind of looking for a thing to do, and he's open-minded, and he's now in Park City, and it's right at this moment where I think he's thinking, this might be a bad idea. He's come to know Rick, and Rick is an incredible product visionary, a rule breaker, and volatile. And so Jeremy's kind of absorbing all of that. And I'm like, oh, by the way, we need to raise like $500,000. And Jeremy is like, I'll come on board. And he passes the hat around to his family and friends, and he helps get the round catalyzed. We all throw our money in, and that becomes the seed round at Skullcandy. I mean, Rick had already put quite a bit of his own money in it to get it that far. Just didn't have the money for production. And then it was just 0 to 300 million in 7 years. Just incredible experience.
And you talked about it earlier about product market fit. Was that one that it just...
Okay. I think the purpose of these podcasts is to tell the stories that few people have ever heard. So I'll tell some of these stories that I don't think very many people have heard them. I'm not totally trusting Rick yet. He's a character. So I got a little skepticism. You know, like all entrepreneurs, he's a gifted storyteller. He's prone to hyperbole. So you're kind of parsing out what might be real, what's not real. When he tells me he sold $900,000 of headphones, like I said, my reaction is, prove it. Send me the POs. So I get an email with the POs. And remember, I just spent 4 years training on how to get reference information out of people that don't want to give it to you. Hey, did you like working with that guy? When they really think he's terrible,
they don't want to be.
They don't want to tell you that. And you got to learn that,
Yeah.
how to get that out of them. So I already have this skill. So I start calling the buyers. And the first one I call, it's a CD store in every mall in America. They have like 1,100 stores. It was called Sam Goody Music Land. If you're old, you would remember this. It's where you shop to buy your music. They had a section of the store where you would buy your Sony music player, a Discman or a tape, and they sold headphones. And this guy's placed a PO for like a couple $100,000 in headphones from a no-name company at CES, Skullcandy. It was probably playing heavy metal with, I can tell you, they went and hired strippers to work the actual booth. It was so contrarian and rowdy in every way. It's like you walked up and it was just noise. And this was like skateboarding, snowboarding, rock and roll all together at once. And so I call this guy and I'm like, why did you buy these headphones? I get to the reference part. You know, build relationship of trust, get to talking. Why are you placing this PO? I'm thinking of investing in this company. What do you see in this? He goes, I've been the headphone buyer here for 20 years. We carry Sony, Sennheiser, Bose. They're all black and silver. They're in the same box. And they're all positioned around sound quality. We sound better than the other guy. Our bass and treble is somehow better. It's like what I liked about Skullcandy was clear blister pack. You could see the product. It was pop colors. There was no black and silver. And there was no talk of sound quality. It's just like this rebellious counterculture crazy thing. And it was positioned so differently than the others. I'm like, I'll just let Panasonic go, replace them with this crazy brand and take a flyer and see if it works with our customers. And that was like my first education of counter positioning, how to counter position against an established category. We've now seen many companies do this since the DTC era. But back in the early 2000s, counter positioning was pretty new.
Yeah.
Right? Fiji water didn't exist yet. Like, when you think of all the best examples of counter-positioned businesses in an existing homogenized category, there weren't very many case studies yet. It was mostly a bunch of Me Too stuff. Like, Sunbum hadn't disrupted sunblock. Fiji hadn't disrupted water. There were, Warby Parker hadn't disrupted glasses. There were very few examples of well counter-positioned businesses. But this buyer kind of teaches me this on the reference call. And then I realize why he's placed the PO. And I repeat that, and I call all the other POs to verify that they're real and hear why they're buying. And that gives me conviction that I should invest in this company when I hear the buyers and why they like it. So another lesson on investing, when you see a business and you like it, but you don't quite have definitive conviction, that means pick up the telephone. Call customers, call references on the people, call experts that can give an opinion. It's those calls where you develop the conviction, not the pitch.
Wow.
It's the work that comes after. So I'll give one example of this. Fast forward, Utah County, Josh James introduces me to this great entrepreneur, Ryan Porter. Says these guys are building digital scarecrows that they put them in a Walmart parking lot and all of a sudden crime goes down. You should take a look at this. Josh, this sounds bizarre and not really down the fairway of our investment thesis, but I'll meet with these guys. I meet with them, like them. They're hardworking and sincere and earnest and honest. You just sense that from the team. They really want to do the right thing. These are fair, good people. And I spend a little bit of time with them, but it's a camera on a pole. So I'm like, guys, I got to call your customers. I'm going to need to talk to Walmart. I'm going to need to talk to Home Depot. I'm going to need to talk to Lowe's. I want to have conversations. So I start calling their customers. And they're like saying things like, yeah, we have 100 of these units, but we have 2,000, 3,000, or 4,000 retail stores. And when we install the units, crime goes down 70%. So every year we're just going to budget and buy more. How many are you going to buy next year? I don't know. As many as I can get budget for. I love this product. After I'd heard that for like 3, 4, or 5 calls, and these are big companies, and these are the heads of security that I'm talking to, we do an offsite meeting. We've just held our first close on Fund 7 at Pelion. We don't even know how big the fund's going to be.
Because this is like, to give context, Pelion is SaaS, Pelion is technology, and like
yes.
This...
To say that Blake had an aversion to hardware is a total understatement. Blake does not like hardware. Blake does not like education businesses. Like many venture capitalists, the pattern matching over many years of trying those things and being tortured for trying, and then just doing SaaS businesses or network infrastructure businesses or cyber businesses that worked. If you have that experience enough times, pretty soon you're like, I'm not going to touch the hot.
This is what I do.
Hot stove anymore over there with education and hardware.
Yeah.
So we're doing an offsite. All the partners we've closed on probably 100, 150 million bucks. We don't even know how big the fund's going to be. But guys, I want to socialize the business with you. I want to gut check this thing. I think I want to invest in digital scarecrows for retailers. And Blake just starts on, hardware. Like, you can just tell, they're like, are you crazy? You're the new guy here and you want to do this business? I'm like, I want to put 10 million in. Let's get going. I want to lead the A. And they're like, You want to put 10 million in this camera thing? They're like supply chain and capital intensity and like all the reasons why you wouldn't like a business like this. And honestly, I would have wilted under the pressure because our partnership puts a lot of scrutiny, as they should, on any business opportunity. It's our job to try and make the best decision we can for our LPs.
If you hadn't talked to the customer. Yeah.
So now it's a battle because I'm like, guys, you're wrong. I just talked to the head of security at Walmart. He tells me he's going to buy hundreds of these things. Look at the economics. If we change this, back then they sold hardware. Like if we get them out of the business of selling hardware and we're going to change this and we're going to call it platform as a service, we don't want to be security monitoring because we know the valuations on ADT and Vivint and Alarm.com, and we don't like those valuations. So it can't be security monitoring. And it can't just be hardware that we sell at a 50% gross margin. Both of those businesses are unattractive. But if we combine those together, we only offer it as a service. We'll put the capital in to own the trailer. We'll own it. And then we'll sell software over the top of this. Think of it as a proprietary network like Cloudflare. Cloudflare built a private network, started with DNS and other products, and then added other products that can only be deployed on a private network. Well, imagine a private camera network and all the most important parking lots, malls, retailers, and facilities and critical infrastructure around the world. The computer vision you could run on top of it. You have an edge controller. We run an NVIDIA chip, can run models, really interesting things. I'm like, think of this as a private network that people are paying us to operate. Once we shifted the paradigm a little bit, but I still had to battle them, and they backed me down to a $7.5 million investment. Part of it was we didn't know how big our fund would be, so we needed to be a little bit conservative.
Size them up.
But the only reason that deal got done, the only reason I withstood the scrutiny of the partnership, the good scrutiny of the partnership, I don't say that in a resentful way. I think it's very healthy. But the only reason it got done was because I called the customers.
Wow.
That's where I got the conviction. Not the business plan or the pitch or liking the guys.
That's outstanding. Like that's a phenomenal story. So we're missing like a big piece, and we've been talking for a while, but I would be remiss if we didn't talk about Stance, because Stance, for me, I was always fascinated. I'm like, how do you take socks and how do you take t-shirts and hoodies and go take something that is completely commoditized and reposition it? And it's kind of what you're talking about, with the counter positioning. And how do you go turn this into a cultural phenomenon? And it feels like it's the culmination of Skullcandy. It feels like it's the culmination of a lot of these things that say we need to have incredible culture and we need to counter position.
It really was the culmination of everything I learned. So lesson number one from the first company, Freeport, I'm never going to put myself in a cash position where an investor can have leverage over me. I'm going to get this business profitable, and then we'll take capital to grow. Then they don't control our destiny. Second lesson, at LogoWorks, we scaled quickly, but we probably got bought so early it never really reached its potential. But we were young, and $60 million at that point was a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we did it because it created the capital that we could make angel investments and do other things. But we learned a lot about operating that business. And the thing about LogoWorks was it wasn't my idea. It was Morgan's idea. I helped execute it, but he had the original idea of, I'm so frustrated getting a logo, we've got to create a solution for this. And then same thing with Skullcandy. It was Rick's idea to build headphones that were counter-positioned. I just happened to come along at the right time and have some capital. I eventually became the executive chairman of the company, and our team was really me and Jeremy and Rick, all sort of performing different roles. But it wasn't mine. I never felt like it was mine, and I certainly didn't have like a founder-level equity position in the company. Stance was something that could actually be mine, right? And I could start it and put everything I had learned into it. It became personal. And so it was all of those lessons over all of those years. It's like, I'm now going to take one of the great things about being on a lot of boards, and I had been on a lot of boards at this point, was you get to observe all these other people and how they operate the company. And just mentally, you're making a checklist like, oh, I love how this entrepreneur does this. I love how she positions this. I love how he does that. And I would just catalog that information. So now I'm finally the guy. I'm the CEO. I'm the founder. It's my idea. I'm going to go do it my way. And it was the first time I could sort of do everything I had learned and put it into a company. It was like, my first real art piece. That's how I would describe it. So I tried to hire the very best people, tried to be very deliberate and intentional with the culture, wanted it to be special. I hired people that I knew from the previous businesses who I knew were outstanding because I didn't want the variable to be, if it didn't work, was it the people? No, every person that we hired was exceptional. It's just a team hiring more A team. And we just pulled every lever we knew how to pull. Clark had run biz dev at Skullcandy, so he already knew the NBA, he already knew Major League Baseball, already knew all the celebrities, we already knew the agents, and I knew how to fundraise, so I went and raised money from all of them. Got Ari Emanuel as an angel investor. That's kind of a big deal. Got Jay Brown as an angel investor. Jay-Z, Will Smith, Rihanna, Dwayne Wade.
I think that was the thing that was so mind-boggling to me, was you found a way to go almost like the influencer type thing where you're like, I'm going to go find the category expert and I'm going to give them equity in the company, but then we're going to fully leverage their brand. We're going to fully leverage Rihanna. We're going to fully leverage Dwayne Wade, the NBA. We're going to
time.
Yeah.
We were close with some of them earlier, but we weren't ready for Rihanna. That had to come when we were bigger. So we held it. We held the card back. Jay Brown was on our board.
They were in your company early.
Yes.
It's like I don't want to say game of chess, but you were 6-7 moves ahead on this is the group of people that I want to go build this with. So there had to have been some of that at some point, that as we expand, we're going to go leverage the strengths of everybody that has upside in this thing.
Yeah, it was a playbook that we used very successfully at Skullcandy. I mean, we put headphones on Danny Cass when he won the Olympic snowboarding medal in Park City.
Wow.
We'd used that playbook for a long time. The world is different today, right? Now influencers control the audience. And you sort of have to wonder, can you even build a brand the way we built those brands today? The right playbook probably today looks something more like Skims, where you take a huge audience that you already have and you build a genuinely differentiated and good product and put it against that audience. That's a lot better than buying, ads on Instagram or Google or TikTok.
No, it's fascinating. And so I did have a question. I was talking to Ty. When to exit? So you talk about that first business and you say, maybe I went too early. If you were looking back at Stance,
Skullcandy was probably too late.
Skullcandy too late. If you were looking,
we took it public, and we probably shouldn't have.
No. What would you do with Stance if you could do it all over again?
Well, look, I had done Stance for 10 years, and it fulfilled every dream, itch, however you can think about it. It was like a magical time. And I don't think it was just me. I think it was everyone who worked there and was a part of it.
I'm still a consumer. I don't wear anything else, and this is long time after you've gone.
Yeah.
So it's obviously it's still strong and the culture's still there. But when we experienced it, when you were there and the team was there was soul in that company. You could feel it. I remember going to a Tony Robbins event, and he used this phrase that I think about when I think about great businesses. And he says, business is a spiritual game. And when you feel it, you feel it. When a company has soul, you just are drawn to it because there's this authenticity in this. And that was Stance,
I think that's true because business fundamentally is a collection of people, right? So the spiritual part is there because it's people. And yeah, it was a magical time. And sometime probably around 2018, I will tell a story about my partner, Blake. I know you had him on a podcast a few months ago. I knew like 2 people in tech when I was graduating from BYU, Ty Mattingly. And I think Ty actually introduced me to Blake. And Blake had just been promoted to run the venture fund at Novell. And I was trying to get money for my startup.
Which is another like
So
really
I went to lunch
story.
with Blake in a cafeteria at Novell and pitched him my idea. And he didn't seem that interested in it. I think he was doing Red Hat or something more interesting than my little startup. But years later, one of my partners at VSpring, Ed Ekstrom, he said, hey, we want to take a trip out to Silicon Valley and we want to meet all the top funds out there and tell them the Utah story. Because if we do these seed and A deals, we're going to need them to follow on. And none of them know who we are. So like, can you go bird dog meetings with Sequoia, Kleiner, Benchmark, Battery, Canaan, Oak, all the...
I mean, what you're describing, these are like
I'm like
the
mid-20s. Yeah, like I don't know anyone, but I know Blake. So I send Blake an email. Hey, Blake, I got to go take a couple of my partners out to Silicon Valley and set up a bunch of meetings with funds I don't know. Can you help me with that? And Blake, one of his just great qualities is he's very abundant, right? And he replies and he's like, yeah, let me send some intros. And he's like, hey, John, Ted, Kleiner, meet Jeff. Hey, he's just fund by fund is literally opening up his Rolodex and introducing me to the managing partners of all the top funds. So we go to our dog and pony show. We tell them all about Utah, how it's going to be the next great place for startups and a great place for tech ecosystem. And this was all through Blake's introductions. The Novell Venture Fund, it was $300 million. $100 million was targeted to directly invest into companies. And the other $200 million was actually LP commitments in the top funds where Eric Schmidt had relationships. So Eric Schmidt's like, hey, Blake, meet Axel. Hey, Blake, meet Battery. Hey, Blake, meet Kleiner. And so Blake ends up on a bunch of their LPACs. He's basically on the board of these funds representing Novell's interests. So he knows all these guys and he just abundantly introduces.
But what's insane to me, like when you're describing this, I did a podcast with Ty and he was talking about those Novell days. It's like, I'm sitting down with Bill Gates. I'm sitting down with Steve Jobs. These are like the legends. And it was like, that was the world. And so like with Blake, you know, you've got this massive company and he's this junior guy. And somehow it's like, you're in the best venture firms that still exist. You know, this is the A-list of A-list.
Yeah. So we go around fund to fund. Hey, here's Utah. It's awesome. And try and get them hyped up. We're like, we just raised a $125 million fund. We're going to invest in Utah companies. We'd love to co-invest with you. And they're kind of like, okay, cool story. You know, thanks for coming by. But it was Blake's introductions that made that whole thing possible, which built the early network that I had when I went to fundraise for LogoWorks. That's how I met a lot of those guys, was through Blake. All the way back to Stance, Blake comes by with Chris, random visit in about 2017, 2018. And for any of you who've been to Stance, it is a pretty magical place to work. It really was like, wait, that's Kevin Durant playing basketball. Wait, that's Beyonce. Wait, that's Jaden Smith. It's just like every day there would be a different person there. I would literally get text messages. Hey, why is Beyonce at the San Clemente Target? I don't know. Can't confirm or deny. Like, it was just this incredible, like, just lineup of people. And Blake and Chris come by and it's all of that energy that you felt. And they're like, hey, would you ever come back to venture? We got a partner, Carl, who's 71 and he's retiring. And we're kind of starting to think about a new partner. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of like living my dream life in every way. I don't know if I would ever leave this. Okay, let's keep talking. So every time they're in town, they'd come by, we get talking, and I started reflecting and I'm like, wow, I've done this for 10 years. Like another whole chapter. Like Skullcandy was 12 or 13 years. Stance had been 10 years. I'm like, I'm getting older. How many more of these do I have in me? And I got to thinking, man, I always wanted to be a partner at a venture fund when I was an associate at a venture fund. And I started talking to some of my friends and saying, hey, what would you think about venture? And they were all like, oh, you should go do that. You've been a good angel investor. You should go do that. And so the more and more I started to think about it, I got excited about just starting another new thing, doing something new. And Pelion seemed so perfectly positioned where you could see the MXs and the Lucids and the Divvies. This is like 2016, 17, all inflecting. And I had been an angel investor in those businesses. And so I knew the marketplace. And I just felt like, yeah, Pelion could really make an impact. We could really elevate the whole place. And just really finally put Utah on the map. The very story that I was in Sand Hill Road telling back in 2000 or 2001, all these years later, like 20 years later, it's kind of happening now. Like multiple unicorns all over the Utah landscape. It's not just Novell, there's a whole bunch. And it's investable. And for the first time ever, LPs want access to it. And I just thought, I'd had a couple of great friends that said, if you ever want to come to venture, come talk to us. So I went and had those conversations with those firms, both great firms in Silicon Valley. And one of them really wanted me to move to Silicon Valley, which I was unwilling to do. And the other one, he said something interesting, is one of my board members at LogoWorks, a guy named Craig Sherman. And he's a partner at Meritech. He was the chief marketing officer at myfamily.com, later ancestry.com. He invented the subscription model, then joined our board at LogoWorks. I introduced him to Bob Cagle, became an entrepreneur in residence at Benchmark, and then became a partner at Meritech. So we've known each other all these years. And he's like, Jeff, I've lost several deals in a row. This was back in the highlight of 2020, 2019. And he's like, you know, people are paying crazy valuations. Everyone has a growth fund. It's no longer just like us and IVP and TCV. It's like Tiger and Viking, and everyone's coming to the party and everyone's paying up. And the late stage game's really hard now. And I got to thinking, do I really want to be a VC in Silicon Valley? It's like ultra competitive. How would you differentiate? How would you counter position? Do you specialize? We're going to be the fund for whatever thing. No, that's been done a million times. We're going to be small cottage venture. That's Benchmark. We're going to be the earliest and first believer. We're first round capital. Like, what idea could I think of in venture that hadn't already been done? They'd all been done. I couldn't think of anything novel. And then I thought, man, we could come to Utah and we could really make a difference. We could really begin to try and elevate just the level of investing in Utah. Try and be better and just lift all the ships. And wouldn't that be an incredible thing to be a part of? And so we talked for a long time, but eventually a year later in the summer of 2019, I called those guys and I'm like, okay, I'll join. And Blake flew out. We had sushi. We hashed it out. And I became chairman at Stance. And my first hire, really one of my co-founders, I call all the first 5 people co-founders. They were there at the ground floor before there was anything. His name's John Wilson. I went to him and I was so nervous. Like, John, I have to get something off my chest. I'm thinking of leaving. And I was so worried he was going to feel let down, like I was somehow abandoning him. He was like, dude, I always wanted to operate this business.
He was fired up.
Oh, he's like, I can't wait. He's like, let's go. I'm the CEO. I'm like, yeah, you're the CEO. Cool. I'll be the chairman if you need anything, but you go do it. And so the very thing I was fearful of wasn't even a thing. He was awesome. And to be fair, I think I had a lot of the ideas about how to practically implement the culture. John actually did it. He was the genuine operator that made the culture magical, kept it organized.
So he was the exact right hire.
Oh, John Wilson is, honestly, if I had to summarize my whole life story, which I just summarized my whole life story in like an hour, I would say the reason why I am such a lucky person is I somehow stumbled into all these great people that I got to work with. In each one of my businesses, I've worked with the highest caliber, highest quality people. I really have. Like, I look at LogoWorks and Morgan Lynch, what an incredible business partner. Just everything you could hope for in a business partner. Then I get to work with Jeremy Andrus and Rick Alden, a genuine product visionary and a genuinely gifted operator. Like, incredible humans. Then I get to work with John Wilson and Taylor Shoup and Aaron Hennings and Ryan Kingman. Those were our first 5. These were the guys that joined when there was nothing, no revenue, no product, the ground floor. Let's go build this together. And they're all just incredible people. And then I come to Pelion and I'm like, there can't be more of these people. And I got Blake and Chris and Tyler and Sterling and Chad and Ben.
I mean, I don't know if there's anybody at Pelion I don't like.
It's the craziest thing. I go into work every day and I'm like, I genuinely enjoy all of these people. How's this even possible again?
Yeah.
Honestly, my expectations were like, this is not going to be as good as Stance. And it is different. But the quality of the people is just incredible. It really is incredible. And I'm not even talking about just naming the part. You get to the next level. I just had my daughter, who just graduated from college, intern for 4 months at Pelion.
How rad is that?
It was incredible for me to get to work with her, be on pitches with her. She didn't want this. I wanted this for her. And I wasn't there last week when she gave her going away speech in the partner meeting. But 99% of the associates that come in and do this program, the internship, I think your partner was an intern once.
Dave. Yep.
He's a legendary intern now. And they all say, I can't wait to be a venture capitalist. And my daughter's like, I will never do this ever again. we got it completely out of her system. She's like, I want to go work in a startup. But one of the things that revealed to me was she would call me every night and talk about how incredible our young teammates were to her. They could have easily been like, oh, daddy got you a job. Like, we all recognize the nepotism here. But no, they didn't treat her that way.
Wow.
They welcomed her. They taught her. They spent quality time with her. She would say, Taylor spent so much time with me. Christy has taught me so much. I think Allie might be genuinely the nicest human being I've ever met, ever. And every day she would give me the play-by-play. And I thought we had a good junior team. But now I'm sort of looking at them in a whole different light. They really take the time with our interns and our young people to teach them and mentor them. I always cared a lot about development of our people at all of my companies. One of the great things about Pelion is Blake, one of his superpowers, he's incredibly inclusive. We could be pitching like a sovereign wealth fund and he's like, bring the interns. This will be a great experience for them. No other venture fund would do that. But he just wants them to have the experiences. And so it's been really great to be a part of that, have my daughter be a part of that, and recognize how genuinely abundant our team is internally with each other. I think it's rare. It's easy to have territoriality in a venture fund because they all want to become a partner.
So I've got to share a couple data points. So my business partner, Dave, was an intern at Pelion. And I think, he would look back at everything that he does and say that was the foundation. I was able to come in as an intern, and after meeting Chris and Blake, they've had an army of interns come through, and they create these opportunities to give Utah kids an opportunity in venture and in tech. Like, those are hard jobs to get, and they expand the net. And so that was the first one. The second one was Sandlot would not exist without Pelion. So Chad Packard, who's Dave's good buddy.
We like to call him our chief legal officer.
Oh, he's like, literally, like, Dave has this idea of, it was peak COVID. The world was going nuts. And there was this small window to invest in David Neilman's airline. And Dave's like, I could put this capital together. And so he calls up Chad and he's like, hey, Chad, how do I do this? And Chad's like, you set up an SPV. And he's like, what's an SPV? And Dave had an LLC, I think it was a decade old, called Sandlot. And he didn't want to pay for a new LLC. And so
what a great story.
Chad shows us how to shows Dave how to set up a SPV, uses his decade old name, and goes and puts $25 million together for this iconic aviation entrepreneur that the only reason we had any chance to be in that deal was the world went nuts with COVID. And there was this tiny window where the capital dried up. And I think about like 5 years later and how generous those guys have been to me. Like, I've got nothing I'm an LP in your funds, I'm always cheering for you. But they've been so good to me, and we just admire you guys. Admire, everybody on that team. Love what you're doing. The fund you guys just raised is so impressive. It's not an easy fundraising environment, and you guys stomped.
It was so brutal.
Yeah,
I can't tell you how many times I went to Europe and the Middle East, and the number of flights and hotel rooms. I think someone added it up, and
the
it
number
was
like 500 plus million, right?
I think it was over 1,050 meetings and millions of millions of miles. It was like an incredible haul, but the whole team jumped in, everyone worked together, and we got it done.
So as we wrap, talk to me about kind of 3.0, like from these early stages to being an operator to now you have the capital, you have the experience, you've got the track record. Like, what does the next decade look like? You talk about these decades of Skullcandy and this decade of Stance. What does the next decade look like?
Look, I think we have a vision.
And even cutting you off, that question that you ask interns, what's your dream? Like when you get to the top of that mountain, what does it look like?
You turn it on me. Yeah. I think our vision is, look, we really want to build, I don't know what you want to call it, 100-year, a legacy, a fund that will be here forever, a firm that will be here forever. We've been very careful about succession and trying to get that right. We're still feeling it out. But we have a multi-generational firm. We have very young people in their 20s. We have people in their 30s, people in their 40s, people in their 50s, and almost a couple of people in their 60s, not quite yet. But it's a broad team. And we've somehow figured out how to work together, and we want this to continue. In order for that to continue, the whole marketplace has to grow. So we had to invest and grow Utah. And so first and foremost, it's being abundant about the ecosystem that we have here. It's not just the capital. We have to build everything. It's the universities, it's teaching entrepreneurship, it's mentoring the young people, it's all of those things building. The capital is just one component of it, getting the right board members and the right companies. There's so many facets of it. But we really believe like Utah has the natural DNA. Just there's an industriousness that goes back since the state was founded, a self-reliance, an entrepreneurial spirit that exists here.
Just this
can-do,
resourceful.
It's one of the best hallmarks of the state's culture. Like people are not afraid of entrepreneurship here. They're not afraid to start businesses or be in business for themselves. And that's not the case everywhere else. We have that naturally in the DNA of the Utah population. So let's spark it and make it even bigger. We want everyone to win. I think it's great. My old colleague, Gavin Christensen, has this amazing fun Kickstart that sometimes we compete, sometimes we collaborate, still have massive respect for what they're doing. We want them to be even bigger and more successful. The more of those that exist, the better. And you just go down the list. We need all of them. And likewise, we need more anchor tenants. We need another LVT. We need, like each business that's successful, there has to be one coming behind it. And so we care deeply about the ecosystem. We care deeply about the firm. We want those things to be enduring. I would love to be like 70 or 80. And the great thing about venture is I could foresee myself working very part-time. Maybe you do a couple deals and sit on a couple boards, and you could work into pretty old age if you stayed sharp, kept your playbook fresh. I know some people think venture capital is a young person's game, but I actually think you can. There's a lot of examples like Dick Kramlich at NEA that have done it successfully into their 80s. There's a network and it stays with you. Like Blake doesn't have to go down and beat the bushes for deals.
They find him. Yeah.
They call him. Hey, Blake, buddy, I'm at another fund. Do you want to do a deal with me? And they're good deals. So I think you can continue to source and be effective as an old venture capitalist. That's interesting. The other side of it is I get a lot of satisfaction now working with the younger people as kind of, for lack of a better term, their entrepreneurial therapist. I got all these young entrepreneurs. A lot of them are going through it for the first time. And when their best employee quits, their customer leaves them, their competitor does something crazy that they didn't anticipate, and they've risked it all. And in those moments of high anxiety, I'm the first phone call every time. I'm the first phone call. What do we do? And I like being the thought partner now without the pressure that I felt when I was operating.
When I hear like the business is a spiritual game thing, it's that phone call. It's you've got somebody that's so in it. It's almost like a grandpa and a, where you're like, you're there and you have all the experience and you can 100% empathize because you've lost your best employee and you've lost your best customer and you've had to shut a business down, but you're not in it every day. And so you can detach and you can those are like really beautiful moments. And if I could give you an observation, we were co-investing on a deal and you taught me something. I don't even think that you realized you taught it to me, but you were talking about saying no and the elegance of keeping really good bedside manners with an entrepreneur. And even if you're saying no, to not crush their dream, to find a way to still encourage them and still give them the love. And it's, where you see the opposite, where it's kind of, I'm capital, I'm king, and, come and that it was a very insightful for me on like how you go about really encouraging people to keep going. You can't invest in every company.
It's a challenging conversation, right? You're going to say no 1,000 times for every one time you say yes. So you better figure out how to turn people down. And again, if you can't judge a person's potential, I don't think you should. How do you really judge a business potential? That's even harder. So it's very hard to predict which businesses are going to work at the stage we invest. There's not very much signal. You get signal from the people, signal from the idea. It's not like we got 5 years of trended financial statements and metrics, and we don't have that at the seed and Series A. So you're having to make decisions with really imperfect information before it's obvious to everyone else. And there's no question that you're going to pass on some businesses that you should have said yes to. And you're going to fund some businesses that you shouldn't have funded. This is part of the game. And so I think there is a important humility and respect for another founder. This is another person that quit their job, took the plunge, risked everything, put it all into one business, is trying to make it work as an entrepreneur. The last thing I want to do is be critical and think that I know more about their business or their space. Now, I might have to make an investment judgment as to whether or not I invest, and I might have strong opinions as to the risks and merits of a company that I would share in my partnership. Obviously, if I didn't have conviction in an entrepreneur, I'm not going to tell them that. Like, that's not my place. I might tell my partners that I didn't get conviction in that entrepreneur, but maybe they turn out to be an amazing operator, amazing entrepreneur. And who am I to say that they could or couldn't be that? So I think it is a really, really challenging conversation to turn people down, give them bad news, be straight with them, give them genuine, honest feedback, and do it in a way that's not critical, that's actually helpful. That's a tough thing to do. Like, I've had that conversation a lot of times and I'm still not sure I'm perfect at it. And I got a lot of words and phrases that I use to try and
I think you're really
make
good at
it work,
but
it's hard.
I don't know if skinny Jeff's going to be as good. I think fat Jeff, just more warm when you'd show up, I really do think you're going to have a harder time with it going forward.
The thing about being an entrepreneur is a startup is insatiable. It will take everything you're willing to give it. And if you love it, and I have loved the businesses that I've been a part of, I truly enjoyed them. I thought about it on date night. I thought about it in the shower in the morning. I thought about it every waking thought. Probably thought about it during my kid's parent-teacher conference. Oh, you're telling me something about my kid? No, I'm thinking about my business. it would take everything I could give it, and I loved giving it. So I sacrificed a lot of things, right? I was unbalanced for a long time, and not just in physical, in relationships and other things, because I guess I didn't know another way. I didn't know how to take care of myself first. Eventually, you get old enough and you realize, well, if I don't take care of me, who's going to take care of me? And I can't borrow from my body forever. Like, I better fix it. And so eventually I got serious about it. And, I weighed 180 pounds when I was 40. I weighed 219 pounds when I was 50. I went into my doctor. He's like, this is not good. Your cholesterol's high. You got to fix this. And so I had to go through a whole process of thinking about my body like a startup. I was lucky enough to get an amazing trainer. And he's like, I'm going to talk to you on your terms. You're going to be the CEO of your body. What's a CEO do? The first thing you do when you come into a company? Oh, I want to look at all the dashboards. I want to look at the data. I want to see trended financials. I want to see all the metrics, all the ratios. I want to understand the output of the business first, and then I can start to diagnose the input. And he's like, let's do that for your body. I'm going to have a phlebotomist come to your house every 3 months and take your blood. We're getting your DNA sequenced by your doctor. We're going to see what genes you have that are good and bad. And we're going to put you on a program, and you're not going to miss. I'm your accountability partner. You're going to control your calories. You're going to wear an Oura ring. You're going to wear an Apple Watch. You're going to track all of this stuff. You're going to be the CEO of a body. If we can't instrument you, like you go in and you instrument a business, you wouldn't fly a plane without instruments. You wouldn't operate a company without metrics. How are you going to figure out your health if you don't have those? And that experience, his name's Clark Bartram. Anyone wants to go to his Instagram, Clark Bartram. Tell me you've ever seen a 63-year-old with this kind of physique ever in your life. So I was blessed to meet Clark Bartram. He added a whole new perspective to health to my life. That was almost 3 years ago when I made the decision to change my lifestyle around health and fitness and diet and sleep. And I just had my annual physical with my doctor, and he told me, your blood labs are better than any teenager that comes through my office. He's like, you are aging in reverse.
You look like Benjamin Button. Like you're like going the other direction. Like
I've worked hard at this. All the people in my office will be like, don't get him started. We don't want to hear about your peptides, and we don't want to hear about your diet. And we don't want to hear about your walking regimen. They've all heard it too much. But that became, every couple of years, I like to take a new hobby and go really deep on it.
Yeah.
And it became the thing that I adopted. Now I'm kind of on the other side of it. It's just a habit now, but I had to recalibrate everything. I was unhealthy.
You look fantastic, and it's a great way to end in that I've admired you for a long time. Look up to you as kind of a mentor, but also like just a light. Like I love people who are kind. I love people who are good, that you can feel that they care about you. And I'm one of a lot of people that but I've never not felt that you care about me. And I think it's one of the most admirable qualities if you can kind of project warmth. And I don't know if I could give you a more sincere compliment that when you show up, I think people feel that you care about them and you're pulling for them. And especially in the world that you're in, that goes so far. Like to be a founder and just to have somebody believe in you matters a lot. And I think, anyway, so.
Thank you for the kind words. Can I come back and do your podcast again? I didn't know the compliment part was going to be a part of this, but it felt pretty good. And I would just reciprocate and say, when I first met you, I was instantly struck by your abundance, and how you cared about other people and how you conducted your life. I could see the kind of discipline, the leader that you were to your people. It did not take long. And I think that's why I was equally like, Casey Baugh is the kind of guy I want to have in my orbit, right? You want to be around people that make you better. You want to be around people that you admire. And I definitely had that same man crush on you. So I'm glad it's all mutual.
That's a great way to end. Give it up for Jeff Kearl.
Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by Sandlot Partners.